So PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. This is in terms of behaviour. So when you're kind of confronted with a behaviour, you would use these elements of PACE depending on the situation. So say a child came out of a classroom and was kicking doors frustrated, you might go in straight away with the curiosity element. Oh, I haven't seen you, but like what's made you feel like this? Like, be curious about it. And they'll be like, oh well, so and so's. So then you're immediately kind of getting something straight away, rather than in the past where you were kind of trained in like an authoritarian, just kind of, just deal with what you see, surface behavior. Whereas the PACE approach allows you to go a little bit deeper and offer strategies for regulation.
Welcome to All Aboard, where we help parents navigate the ADHD journey. Whether you're at the beginning of this journey asking what now, or you've trodden this path for a while and are wondering what's next, All Aboard ADHD is here for you. We will bring you key information from expert interviews alongside parents sharing their real-life lived experience to help you feel less alone. I'm Claire, and today we'll be talking about teaching children with ADHD with our expert guest, Jamie Gilbert, aka Mr. G. Jamie Gilbert is an assistant head teacher at a school for children with social, emotional and mental health needs. He has been teaching SEMH children for over 10 years and works daily with a range of amazing neurodivergent conditions such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia and many more. Jamie created his social media channels at Mr. G Teacher on TikTok and Instagram, amassing almost 1.3 million followers so far between them, to positively raise awareness of teaching neurodivergent children. Welcome aboard, Jamie.
Hiya, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here today. So I wanted to start by talking about you before we dig into any of the kind of deeper questions, because from the very first moment I came across your incredibly positive work, I just wished we could fill every classroom with a teacher like you.
That's very kind.
Oh, well, you've earned that. Can you begin by telling us a little bit about your journey as a neurodivergent teacher and actually what inspired you to want to share your techniques on social media? Because you've become, I feel, like a real advocate for teaching children with ADHD.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start off from the beginning. So I was first involved in an SEMH school, so a school for children with severe social, emotional, and mental health challenges from the age of 17. My mum actually teaches secondary cookery in that setting. She still does now to this day. And it was my mum. I wasn't sure what to do with my life. My mum said, "Why don't you come volunteer in my school?" It didn't cross my mind at all. I always wanted to go in the RAF, and then when that didn't happen, I had no idea what was going to be next. So I volunteered in SEMH school. I was 17, and I got put in the secondary department. So I was with 15, 16-year-old old school EBD boys, is what we called it back in those days, which was the terminology emotional behavioural difficulties. So these were the type of children how you had to get excluded from free mainstream schools to go to. I got offered a teaching assistant job a week later. So the head at the time recognised that I had this kind of ability to be able to relate to these children from the get-go, which he described as very unique. I looked like a year 11 as well. And because I was tiny, I often got mistaken for a student because I was only like a couple of years older than these myself. But I was able to even bring them down then, back at 17, and be able to talk them through their emotions, be able to help regulate then. And that was before even learning anything. So I got offered that teaching assistant contract a week after I was volunteering, and the head at the time said, "I'll offer you that to the end of the academic year. I want you to go away, get your degree, come back, and I'll give you a job as a teacher." And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, when I done my school centre initial teacher training, I went for being a PE teacher. They said no. And the following sentence was, "We want you to do primary. We want you to do all subjects. We think you'd be great at it." I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I can teach like geography, history, science, maths, English, everything." And they say, "Oh no, I think you'll be really good at it." So then I came back to North Tyneside. At the time, we were creating, it's what's called an ARP. It's an additionally resource provision. It was attached to a mainstream school, but it was for children who were kind of in between mainstream and our kind of standalone SMH provision, if that makes sense. So this was a kind of like a bridge in between the two. And I was leading a class there with up to 15 pupils, all with social, emotional, and mental health needs. That was really hard for the first 2-3 years, having like half your class with it, in a sense, half of a mainstream size class. Typically, it's around about 30, so half of them being like ADHD. It was it was a big challenge.
Full on.
To the point where the school realised that, and they actually brought 6 of the higher band children, the ones who were like the more extreme behaviours. They brought 6 of them over to their main site with me to teach. So I did that for about 3 or 4 years. Then in lockdown, I was asked to be primary leader, so leader of primary, which was amazing. I absolutely love that. So I was like kind of running your own little school, and because it was in lockdown, I learned so much. So taking over leadership around lockdown, so it's a time of uncertainty, but I felt that I learned a lot during those months, particularly with the news that all vulnerable children were still eligible to go to school, because all of our children were classed as vulnerable. And normally we have a class sizes of 6 to 8 students. And in lockdown, I only had 2 students, and there was like a reduced timetable. So they used to come in, it's 10 o'clock. We used to give them the breakfast. We used to do like a little bit of English and maths in the morning. Then in the afternoon, I just done some really creative stuff. Some of that was on my socials as well. I just thought at the time, I'm not going to be able to do some of this stuff kind of ever again. So things like lightsaber battles in the classroom, Nerf gun battles, things that you couldn't do in a whole class because they would get like a little bit too lively, and you would have to risk assess it. But when I only had 2 students, I was able to kind of facilitate those things. So in terms of like relationship building, it was phenomenal. And those boys actually did make outstanding academic progress that year as well. So I don't know if that had any impact whatsoever, but
I'm sure it did.
And then this year, March, the head teacher at the time, who's just left, promoted me to acting head teacher, which is acting assistant head teacher, sorry, which is my current role now. So I transitioned from the primary over to secondary. So I lead all day-to-day operations in the secondary department, so children from 11 to 16. And I'm leading ICT, and I've also led English, the GCSE English pathways as well. So the same school I volunteered in, I am working at 10 years later.
It's such a phenomenal story, and I've no doubt you will have made a huge impact on many kids' lives over that stretch. And before we kind of dig into, as you said, that ability to relate to those children and why that is and what worked, give us a little insight into what made you start to share that stuff on social media.
So it happened when I had a class when they were quite active on their phones. This was around when TikTok started. Well, the first time I ever heard of it. And I had a few boys, and they're like, because they're not allowed their phones in primary, so they used to come and they go in my drawer until the end of the day. But they sometimes would go on them in like homeschool transport on the way home on the taxis and stuff. So anyway, it was before any lesson started. So as soon as they came in the morning, I had a couple of boys say, "Oh, Mr. G, have you seen this TikTok?" And I was like, "What's TikTok?" And they showed us this video, and it was just some type of dance, and that was it, kind of thing. And I was doing a project on e-safety at the time, on how to deal with like negativity and comments and just how to be safe online. So at the time, I spoke to the head and said, "Look, I'm planning on doing this e-safety project. How would I go about like creating like my own like TikTok, and then going through it, and then when teaching the children how to kind of respond to negativity and manage their emotions and how they feel when there's a negative comment. But we'll do it together as like a group project thing, and we'll post some videos, and we'll be able to kind of like track what's going on." And so I had to get various avenues of consent, parental consent, head teacher approval, GDPR approval. The head teacher at the time just said, "Yeah, just go for it. That sounds great. I understand what you're doing there." And then we posted did a couple of videos, and then one of them went viral, started to go viral. And that was the first time a video like started to take off. So we'd done a piece of work, like we tracked all the comments, and then I think we just decided if there was any like negativity, we'll just delete the comment. There was certain filters that were put on, so you couldn't type in their names or anything. So there were certain things that we had to do, and then it started becoming a more of a relationship building tool. It had an overwhelming amount of positivity linked to it. And then the actual video itself was really cool. But for me, if I was able to do it, but I was never able to have like more than one device set up at the time. It was the process of making them and going through it and seeing when we got things wrong and then we got things right, and like high fives at the end of it when you know you've done like a good dance together, or you know like this was like a really cool piece of content. It was that part that for me it was like I was getting we're getting a lot of like satisfaction from it, and then the followers just kept coming and coming, and so some of these videos started to hit like millions of views on TikTok straight away, and that's when I had to get a certain type, like an extra type of content, which is basically it's called a LADO in our local authority, so that stands for local authority designated officer. So that's someone who's in the council. Basically, and he checked all the content at the time, and he said, "Yeah, that's absolutely fine what you're doing." And then it got, because this was a time when I had consent to have the children's faces on. And then as the channel progressed, and I was obviously monitoring everything, so it was all positive stuff. One video has got like 27 million views of me and another
Wow.
student dancing, and it was 95% of it was all positive. You obviously there's a minority of negativity, but this lad started to get recognised around Newcastle.
Oh my goodness.
It was all positive stuff, but then I thought, what if one occasion he gets recognized and something negative happens and I'm responsible for that? I was just like, I'm going to use pixelation software just to make sure the kids are unidentifiable from there. And I'm really glad I have done that, because we've had a lot of viral videos since. And unless you know like what trainers the child's wearing,
Yeah.
you're not going to know who it is. When we went through that transition of the channel, the kids were good, but it hasn't stopped them asking, "Oh, can we do a TikTok? Can we do a video?" and things like that. So yeah, that's how well it started. It started in lockdown, and that was a similar time where I learned to shuffle dance myself during lockdown. And I thought, I'm going to try and teach the kids to do this, and that's kind of what a lot of my content. That's where I get a lot of the higher views from
that
is that
stuff.
type of interaction. Yeah.
Well, you clearly know how to relate to children. Maybe it's because you started so young in this process. As you were talking about, even just the way in which you go about making these videos, that will have built so much rapport, I guess, and a relationship between you and all the pupils that you've taught with. So why is that so essential, that trust and that positive relationship? How does it create a kind of successful learning environment from a teaching perspective?
It's absolutely pivotal. In a mainstream class, it's important, but in a neurodivergent class, it's far more important. A lot of our children have had adverse childhood experiences. They've been through significant trauma, so that trust element can take a lot of time to build up. Particularly if you're a new teacher and you have to start from scratch. I've noticed that a little bit with my secondary teaching this year, because I have like a different class each lesson. So like I had year 8 today, year 9, year 10, 11, so forth. But in primary, it's a little bit easier in an SMH setting where you've got 6 to 8 children all the time for every lesson. There's more opportunities to develop that relationship, build that trust. So once you've got that trust, you can really start to push the learning. And when kids make mistakes, if you've got that trust and you've got a secure environment, it's such a key part of the learning process, actually making mistakes and have a resilience to think, oh, I'm going to change that and I'm going to problem solve that. And it all starts with trust. If you don't have that trust, and if your classroom's not secure, you're gonna see some type of behaviour come out.
It's so great to hear it from your perspective as a teacher, because that's something I've really, really passionate about. And actually with my son, who's now 13, particularly as he was making that transition to secondary, I really, really push that emphasis on trust and building a relationship. And I know this might sound a bit controversial to a degree, but I almost think it doesn't matter to me who you are, how old you are, what job you do, that respect is earned. A child has to trust you. They have to build that bond, because then they can take the positive and the kind of, I was going to say negative, but the constructive, because they trust that you have their best interests at heart. They trust that you understand them. I know that's certainly the case with my son and his Senko, as an example. He had an amazing relationship with her, and he was able to therefore know that she would stick up for him and she had his back and she would help him. But then she was also then able to pull him up, on stuff as needs be, so that they had this evolving relationship together. So I think trust is everything. And it's just really great to hear it from a teacher's perspective rather than just kind of me with a mum hat on.
Just on the back of your point there, when you're saying the Senko can obviously, like, when you have that relationship as well, you can follow things up and you can challenge things. Once that relationship's there, because the best strategy in SMH and still a lot of classroom settings is the firm but fair approach. You don't want to create an element of fear, because that's not going. You're not going to have a nice learning environment with that. But if you're setting the boundaries and expectations from the start, that's something very different. So I'll do all the relationship stuff, but the children will still know the boundaries. And like you say, that's really important.
It is important because they trust you, so they can feel safe in that. It's not going to threaten them, and they can know that it works both ways. I think it becomes really constructive, and it has longevity to it as well, which just feels so immensely valuable. I've certainly seen the positive impact of that. So what are some of the key methods then that you use to connect with children with ADHD on a personal level and build those relationships?
It depends what type of ADHD as well. You get your diagnosis of ADHD, but there's obviously still 3 types within that. So you obviously have your attentive type, you have your hyperactive type, and you have your combined. Now, I noticed, especially through the shuffle dancing, that there was a link between the hyperactivity type of ADHD and muscle memory in terms of memorizing and the repetition of the steps. So a lot of the shuffle dancing you'll see is quite repetitive on my channel, but that's for a specific purpose, and it's actually to support the ADHD brain. Not a lot of people realize that. They think, oh, it's the same kind of moves over and over, which it is in some extent. But the reason it's been is because we're trying to get that into our kind of working memory in terms of ADHD. So for the hyperactivity children, movement breaks are essential. There's a few ways you can do movement breaks. I have a lot of messages saying you can't do movement breaks in a mainstream class. I would argue against that a little bit. I've seen teachers do movement breaks cleverly, and definitely whole class ones. I think you can do things through assemblies. You can do things whole class where you can get the children to be on the carpet, and you can provide a movement break through that, or you can get them a step aside from the desk and provide a movement break from that. In terms of learning, or do you mean like self-regulation?
Well, either, I guess, in terms of, how you use that to connect with them. And obviously you've talked a lot about shuffle dancing and the movement break itself. So I guess it's kind of twofold. There's the initial way in which that allows you to build that relationship, and then, as you went on to say, the way that movement that you're using to build the relationship becomes massively beneficial on then the children in the classroom, I guess.
Yeah. So the movement breaks are for like self-regulation. So I would use them at times where the children are heightened. So it could be coming in from dinner break. So I might do a quick movement break just to bring them down. It could be a point or to bring them back up to burn off some energy as well. So in terms of the academic stuff for ADHD, for me, how I was able to get outstanding academic achievement was, and I don't know how easy this is to replicate, but it's the ability to unlock hyperfocus within a lesson. So I mean, it was particularly happening in English. So I was able to link an English national curriculum objective, say that it was non-fiction writing, and they had to do a report. say like, yeah, in year 4 you have to do a report, and for non-fiction, I would link that to their interest. I would try and tailor that individually to their interests. So rather than just writing a report about, I don't know, something generic that's not going to capture their attention, just tailor it to something that they're personally interested to. And the reason I know their interests is because I've already done that as soon as I've met my class. I've got them. I've done a game to figure out what their interests are. So some children won't tell you what their interests are, but you can kind of, they're the trickier ones where you might have to dig a bit deeper and find alternative strategies. But the majority, they'll be like a pattern. And I've had similar patterns in terms of like, like football, gaming, and then just trying to link your report to that. And what I implemented when I was leader of primary was actually a lesson called SMH. So it was a lesson on social, emotional, and mental health. So basically getting the children to understand the terminology and what it is, because I think that's important as well in terms of the acceptance. So what I'd done in that curriculum was like every Friday, it was like the second lesson on a Friday. So it could be something linked to the social aspect, the emotional aspect, or the mental health. So if a child has ADHD, I'm going to actually educate around ADHD. I'm going to educate around hyperfocus. Once the kids like identified that hyperfocus, what their real interest was, I was able to use that in the national curriculum to my advantage. And then what I would do when they were actually hyperfocusing, say they were on a piece of written work and they were like concentrating, and you could tell like they were completely hyperfocused, I would let them know, right guys, I don't know if you realize, but you're actually hyperfocusing right now. That's absolutely amazing. I'm so proud of like things like that. And then they're getting this praise. Not all of them like that praise, but it's still a recognition of you've actually unlocked hyperfocus. So I like to educate around those things, because I think it's really important to highlight the positives, because there's so much negativity out there.
I couldn't agree with you more in that sense. I think positive reinforcement is everything. And as you say, and I do this a lot with the kids that I work with, helping them always to understand and link it back to their own brain. Because I think knowledge is power in that sense. If we can understand our brains, then we can learn to work with it and we can start to develop the skills we need. And I mean, like you said, not all kids love it. My daughter at times doesn't love the praise, but it's just catching them in that moment, isn't it? And building that sense of positive self, because there's so much value and importance in that. And on your kind of creative techniques, I wanted to just dig into that a little bit more, because I've got one in the back of my mind that I came across that you did and I thought it was amazing. A way in which that you made a subject, it was English actually, super relatable and engaging, because interest is key, right? If you can unlock interest, as you said, in an ADHD brain, you unlock motivation. And that was with rap. Was that right? Was it Shakespeare?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I've done a little bit of rapping before. So it's just that I was actually dared a little bit by the year 10s to do that. Yeah, we're looking at Caesura. And I just thought I'll just do it in a rap format and be more relatable. A lot of these like upper key stage 4 children are like going around in the streets and stuff. So I thought I'll just bring the streets into the classroom and do it that way. I done it with Romeo and Juliet. I was trying. We were looking at old Shakespearean language and relating it to the common language. So one of them it's right at the start, and it's between two rival gangs, the Montagues and the Capulets, and one of them bites the thumb, and as they're going past, which is basically, so he's like, I bite my thumb, which I was trying to explain to the boys. He's basically trying to say, I'll offer you on a fight. But then when he's called out on it, he's like, well, I bite my thumb in like general. I don't bite my thumb at you. So then he kind of like drops it a little bit. So I'm saying, that's what I was trying to say. Like, that's him like backing down from his fight, and they were absolutely loving that. So there is ways around it. You just got to adapt things all the time. The national curriculum hasn't changed too much since I was actually studying myself. I was learning about Romeo and Juliet when I was in year 10, 11, and now I'm teaching it 20 years later.
And managing to make it super relatable. I mean, I guess you must see some actually very positive results and outcomes from making this stuff accessible for the kids that you teach.
Yeah, for a new teacher as well. We've been given like a little bit of autonomy just to be like, don't be scared to kind of just adventure out away from the national curriculum a little bit. There's so much kind of emphasis and stress on you need to have a written piece of work in the book for every lesson, for every subject. Whereas that doesn't have to be the case all the time. You can do something creative. You can put pictorial evidence in there. You can put a video clip in there. So VAC learning styles it stands for visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So they're just different learning styles. So you might just think in maths, you might just do something completely kinesthetic and have a class shop if you're doing money. And you don't have physical evidence in your book, but I bet by the end of the lesson, those children would have definitely learned something. And then there's other ways you can evidence that. So the national curriculum is great for what it does, but then I think teachers can adapt and they know their children the best. So don't be scared to adapt and meet the needs of your cohort. That's what I would say.
Yeah, meet them where they're at. And I know that's hard, like you said, if you're in a mainstream school and you've got kind of 30 kids, but I'm training with ADCA at the moment, and we've actually been doing a lot of work around learning styles. And actually for many people, not even just children, adults with ADHD, they don't actually understand how they learn. So almost exploring that first and foremost, as you say, so they're then taking on board this information and they're actually learning, rather than just having kind of ticking those boxes from an evidence perspective when they may actually not have gained any new information by the end of the class. So kind of what top tips might you give for simple yet proactive teaching approaches and kind of positive interventions that would work in perhaps more mainstream schools with other teachers to better support children with ADHD in their classroom? Because I know these interventions typically would support all children, right? So it's not that it's at the exclusion of others, but it would have a positively beneficial effect across the board.
I would say the key thing would be you would definitely need some self-regulation strategies before you can go on to learning. If the child's not regulated, you're not going to get any learning. So I would focus on that to begin with. And there's a few things you could do. The first thing would be have a trusted adult for that child, where if they're frustrated, they go out and seek that adult for some type of immediate support. Breathing exercises. I found this one online that I've used with a few children, and it's just two sharp kind of inhales through your nose. So it's like, and then it's one deep exhale through your mouth. And then there's some science behind this, and I've used this on loads of children, and apparently there is science that backs this up. Apparently this regulates your nervous system, or it resets your kind of frustration. So if that helps anyone, then let us know. But I have used that on practical examples, and it has worked. It doesn't work all the time, but it has worked on certain children with ADHD. And then I would do a piece of work with the child who has ADHD and kind of identifying their triggers, so we can be proactive and have a support plan in place. It could be a certain lesson you think, oh, this child really hates art, so then let's tailor something around that. Do we really need to continue with this battle, or does a child need a little bit of extra support, or is there something else we can offer? And because behaviour is always a form of communication.
Oh, 100%. I could not agree with you more.
Yeah, what is that child actually telling you through the behaviour? Is it something like surface level, or is it something deeper? We have an incredible person in our school called a link worker. We have multiple link workers across the school, and their role is they are the link between home and school. So they'll provide key information in the morning. So it'll be like, oh, Jamie, this member of staff's had this incident this morning, or he haven't had breakfast this morning. And then I can tailor my practice as a teacher around that individual. I don't know if that level of communication is available in mainstream, but if it was someone who had like a trusted adult, say, had that responsibility, and they were able to speak to parents, has anything how's so and so this morning? Oh, actually, well, this and this has happened. Oh, great, thank you. I'll inform X, Y, and Z, and then we can tailor things around that. But that level of communication is so important for our school, especially when there's so much community stuff and social media. You don't know who's falling out with who. So if we get a heads up from the parents saying, look, so and so has had a falling out with so and so in that class, I can be extra vigilant and I can put support around that and be proactive in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost, I guess, encouraging parents to be the one to be proactive in that, so that, you know, even perhaps giving them an idea around what information is relevant, like whether they've eaten, as you say, any sort of issues that have happened at home, so that you can build up this picture and then actually have a really holistic approach to it. Because I just think that's key. And I think my children, thinking from a mainstream perspective, you know, in secondary you have your form tutor, or in primary it's much easier, isn't it, with a class teacher. But I would hope that everybody, even if they're not yet perhaps having a Senko provision, would have the ability to communicate that information directly to a tutor, and for them to then be able to pass that on across the board. Because I always find that it's like linking those dots has had a really positive effect then on the success throughout the day, for example, and just having that
Yeah.
degree of almost compassion and empathy when it's required, and then adjust accordingly to it. But you said about all behaviour is communication, and I'm so glad you said that, because I absolutely 100% lead with this all the time. And I don't think it's a question that actually gets asked enough. And I appreciate we're all human, and it's an immensely difficult job that teachers do, particularly in kids of like 30 plus, when you're having a challenging day or it's the end of term and everybody's tired. But it almost should be that moment of stopping, pausing and saying, what is this telling me? Like, what is going on here? And maybe actually you gave the example of breathing techniques, but maybe that's something that's beneficial for both, you know, to stop and get a whole class to breathe and pause, because it allows you as a teacher a chance, I would imagine, to like reset in a really challenging moment.
I've used that breathing technique before. I went on live TV on BBC national television just before I was about to speak. I used that just to kind of be, whew, and it did work.
Yeah, I use them all the time myself, and I do it with my kids. My favourite one's the in for four, out for four. And I do it a few times just to kind of slow myself down. But it's hugely beneficial.
Have you seen the one with the hand you do as well?
Yes, but talk us through it.
Yeah, so you just grab your hand, then you're just tracing your hand. So you like going breathing in, inhaling, like exhaling. I've done that one in a classroom before, because what you get the children to do is just draw around the hand, and then you do like the arrows, different colours for like inhale and exhale, and it's just another technique they can use. So that was like another part of the SMH curriculum, just giving the children like a range of self-regulation strategies that they cannot use, when obviously they can pick and choose. But just going on the behaviours communication thing that we alluded to before, we're also trained in the PACE approach. Have you came across that before?
No, tell us about that.
So PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And this is in terms of behaviour. So when you're kind of confronted with a behaviour, you would use these elements of PACE depending on the situation. So say a child came out of a classroom and was kicking doors frustrated, you might go in straight away with the curiosity element. Oh, I haven't seen you, but like what's made you feel like this? Like, be curious about it. And they'll be like, oh well, so and so. So then you're immediately kind of getting something straight away, rather than in the past where you were kind of trained in like an authoritarian, just kind of, just deal with what you see, surface behavior. Whereas the PACE approach allows you to go a little bit deeper and offer strategies for regulation. So the acceptance ones is a great one. Oh, I understand why you're feeling frustrated with that. Why don't we look at this? Or why have you considered doing this? So you're kind of validating their feelings straight away. Because if you don't, you kind of got that battle. You've got that battle straight away, and you'll be like, oh, don't kick that door. Then they kick the door, and then you're in this power struggle. Whereas the PACE approach tries to remove the power struggle, and that's been really useful for our practice. As a school, we transitioned to the PACE approach probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. We're seeing an improvement in our holistic progress, our like overall progress of the child,
particularly from emotional regulation or dysregulation perspective. Because
yeah,
I guess by accepting it, you're also kind of naming it, and then that helps them build a vocabulary and almost a recognition of patterns within themselves, like what's going on here, and the ability to then work through those. And then if you've got these techniques in place, that they're building almost the muscle memory to be able to use them as they need them. But I can absolutely see how holistically that would have a really beneficial approach over like a long period of time. So for kind of teachers and I guess indeed parents that are listening as well, what message would you have about the potential of children with ADHD, just kind of focusing on the positive stuff now, when they're given the right tools and support?
There's so many amazing positives of a child with ADHD. I think it's an absolutely fantastic condition to work with. Resilience. A child with ADHD is so resilient. I've just seen some just tremendous amounts of like resilience and children not giving up and working together. So I think resilience is a massive key skill. That kind of no fear element as well. You can use that if you build, like when we're talking about trust earlier, if you get your class to a point where it's safe and secure, they're not scared to fail. And that's powerful. If you're not scared, and if managed properly, I don't mean like putting themselves in a dangerous situation. I mean, if they're not scared to fail, like academically or with a task, they're not afraid of kind of think outside the box. Creativity, some massive creativity potential in ADHD. The hyperfocus, utilizing that. For me, what works really well with ADHD is having an incentive. So having like a reward system in place. If everybody, if you think if you had a long week at work and you've got, say you're going on holiday or something at the weekend, or you had something significant, or just something to look forward to, even at times where you're feeling frustrated and things aren't going your way, and if you still got that incentive there in the back of your mind, thinking, oh, it's all right, I've got this to look forward to. So what we do as a school is we have incentives throughout the school day. We have bigger incentives, we have smaller incentives, we have personalized incentives, and that's really powerful as well, just to kind of give the child that kind of focus and direction. And just trying to keep them on track.
Unlock that reward system, like you said, because I think that's so important, isn't it? And having those like short-term rewards as well as the big ones, because even if it's as an adult, it might just be super simple things, like whether it's a chocolate biscuit, you might have something to look forward to when you're taking a break, or something you're going to watch later on in that evening. We kind of naturally do that for ourselves. And it's almost, I talk about this a lot, actually, the ability to bring those rewards in when you can figure out what works and when you can unlock that interest. Because it's not always going to be inherent interest, particularly for a kid at school, in doing certain things. But bringing those reward systems in, even in very small, quite immediate ways, sometimes can be massively beneficial.
And then you've got the children who have just got endless amount of energy, who just got an amazing amount of stamina, and just don't give up. Those like truly hyperactive type children who are absolutely amazing. And those are the ones who the movement breaks, so they absolutely love it. But it goes with the movement breaks as well. You got to have that relationship and trust to be able to move them on to the next task after. And that comes with experience, and it comes with having a strong and secure positive relationship. So that I've developed that over time. Some people have been experimenting with movement breaks, like on my channels, and said, "Oh, it didn't work," and there could be a number of factors. But you've got to, for me, I set out the expectations from the start. So sometimes the movement breaks are dynamic, or it can be we'll work towards it, depending on the situation, the child. But there'll always be an expectation there. So if you start reinforce your expectations from the start, right, we're going to do this movement break, and we're going to crack on, and I'm going to help you through a little bit of this English work, just so you've got the next step as well. So you kind of program the brain to be like, we're doing this, but this is still coming. So if you are trying to do your movement breaks in any setting, just make sure that you reinforce your expectations beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. The boundaries around it almost, right? Because transitions are so hard for people with ADHD. So I had a parent actually recently at a play day that my daughter went to, and I thought this is brilliant. In that context, when my daughter arrived, and this was for the benefit of her daughter, she said, before the play date begins, we're going to start with the finish. Let's talk about now what happens at the end. And I was like, oh, so simple, but so genius to begin with that, like set that expectation. And then also know that if these things work well, then we can replicate them, we can do them again. So I think that's really, really great advice. So In terms of success stories, because obviously you are using these interventions amazingly and have seen such incredible results and outcome. You talked about so many amazing stories on your social media channels, and there was one child, indeed this may apply to multiple children, but you mentioned that there was someone that was once deemed unteachable, which is such a devastating term that should never be applied to any child. And I just wondered if you might be able to share a kind of success story. It doesn't need to be that particular instance, but something like that of children, how they really flourish under these methods.
Yeah, there's a few standout ones. I'm going to start with I had a year 6 student. In year 5, he was massively dysregulated. He was getting involved in a lot of physical incidents. We tracked the incidents over a period of time, and it came up with kind of red for us. He was having far too many, basically. And then he came into my setting in year 6. So I always get all this information beforehand. So any child who comes to me, they'll have a pupil profile, and I'll read through it. But at the same time, I'm still gonna treat them as I've kind of met them for the first time and make my own kind of judgment. That is there to inform certain things, but at the same time, I like to get to know them myself. So this child was extremely violent, really dysregulated, wasn't going into lessons. Attendance was an issue. And then I got him in year 6, and then I just kind of I don't know if it was the fresh start, the blank canvas, the relationship building, but he went from having quite an astronomical amount of physical incidents to having completely zero.
Wow.
To having none whatsoever, to the point where his mum at the end of the academic year rang me up personally and said, "You've changed my son's life."
Makes me feel very emotional.
I froze a little bit of that. But yeah, that was deep. So yeah, that was a good one.
That's a good one, and very well deserved feedback, because all the things you talked about, that trust and the time, and the fact that you gave him a blank sheet of paper and just a chance to start again, like meeting him, where he was at that. I think when we started this conversation and I said I wish I could fill schools and classrooms with people like you, I think that's because every child deserves that support and that opportunity to help them.
I know. I wish we could help more, but there's not many SMH schools around there as well. We're very specific in what we do, and there's a high percentage of children being diagnosed with autism as well, and not having suitable provision for those children. So we have a high percentage of autistic children as well, and of other different neurodivergent conditions. But ADHD is still one of our most prevalent ones. But it is hard to manage this in a mainstream environment. I would recommend also in a mainstream classroom having like a safe space, somewhere that child can go. I've had class dens, I've had little caves, I've had like a reading corner that had a human-sized dog bed in, and every child knew when they went in that area, I'm not going to bother them for like a short amount of time where they can just kind of compose.
Reset.
So in a mainstream school, you could have a desk and literally put like a sheet over it, so it's a little den. I think every school will have a desk and a sheet or a towel or something, and you can make a very basic den. And then it's just to do with having like the boundaries and expectations around it. So you just from the get go, it's one person at a time in this den, and we're going to use it when we think we need to use it. So I would definitely have like a safe space to go. In my primary classroom, I have alternative seating as well. Obviously, when no children struggle to sit, so I have a flexible desk that you can stand up at. So and you can so you don't have to be sitting. I've had children do work on the floor, done work on like I've stood desks up, and I've put a massive bit of A3 bit of work up and done painting on the back of a desk. Just things like that. You do obviously. Like I struggle to sit for a long period of time.
I'm sat on a wobble stool right now, so I'm no different.
Or you can have the things that you have when you have like elastic bands at the bottom of your seat, and you can have like you say fidget cushions. Another teacher, she used to have artificial grass underneath the kids' chairs, just for a sense, a little bit of that was really cool. So yeah, it's little things like that. But I think the key thing for me is what we're trying to teach all our primary children as soon as they come into our school is just to use their words. If we can get them to the point where they can identify what's wrong, we can help them the majority of the time. And I think that would apply to mainstream, probably even more so because there's so much going on in a mainstream class and there's so many pupils in there. If there's a child with ADHD within that setting and they're frustrated, try not to bottle it up. Try not to mask it, because it'll come out. It'll come through behaviour impulsively at some point. So try and speak to like we said before, like a trusted adult if you can.
I say that all the time to my kids. You know, if you have to tell somebody because they can help you, but if you don't tell them or you're not honest, then they don't know what it is that you need. Even if you don't know what you need, but just explain what you're feeling in that moment as much as you possibly can. At least it gives people something to work with. So kind of what one piece of advice would you like to leave the parents that are listening to help them feel less alone on this ADHD journey?
I think it would just be to just not give up on your child and fight for your child as well. An EHCP is a fantastic document if you can get that, because it's a live document that we as teachers and leaders, we have to make sure we're following this. So we have to report on this EHCP, and it'll go through a list of outcomes that are relevant and differentiated to the child. So it'll go through all that. There'll be a social outcome, emotional one, a mental health one, and then there'll be one for every subject that they do. And having that document is really powerful because we have to adhere to it, and it's a live document. It's not, once you have an EHCP, it's not like, oh, there's an EHCP and it's put it on the shelf. We review it annually, and it's a really important document to have. And if you once you've got that, you can really start to make a difference. And if the school aren't adhering to the EHCP, then you can challenge it as well. So you can kind of fight for that child.
I think EHCP is an episode in itself, but I completely agree. You've got to be your
Yeah.
child's voice, haven't you? You have to fight for them. And I think that being their voice, to begin with, when I very first started having to fight for my son at my time, my daughter does now have a diagnosis too, I so worried about being that parent. And now I'm quite unapologetic about it because I try to do it from a really informed basis, but also try to really just build a partnership. So, you know, from a school perspective, so that trust and that relationship is inherent and that we're kind of all working towards the same thing. So I think, yeah, absolutely fight for your child. I'm with you on that very much. But thank you so much, Jamie, for being with us today and sharing, obviously, your journey and your experiences with all the phenomenal kids that you teach. I genuinely love watching all the videos you share of your shuffle dancing, of everything that goes on in the classroom with just your incredible kids. So we will share in our show notes, we'll share all your social media handles so that if you don't already follow Jamie, then please do, because you're just such a ray of sunshine and it always brings a little bit of joy to my day. So yeah, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I've completely forgotten to say that I'm also going through my own personal
Oh my
diagnosis
goodness,
journey.
yes. Yeah, tell us about that before we go. That's so important.
Yeah, that's typical me. So I've helped diagnose for hundreds of children during my time. I don't know if it's the same where you are, but we provide feedback to CAMS.
Yeah.
I've helped out fill out hundreds of these CAMS forms to help diagnose children, and then provide regular updates to CAMS. And it's always like the same when you're doing the updates. It's always the same form, and you're going through. You're ticking all these things. There's about 12 to 14, like as easily distracted things like that. And then I was just once where I was filling one of these out, and I thought I'm going to like relate it to myself, and I filled it out, and I thought, hang on a minute, like I'm hitting like all of these traits here. I never once thought about it until then. So I actually spoke my GP. This is about 2020 as well. So this is a long time ago. So I spoke my GP, and he said, yeah, I think you've got enough there to go like to the next stage. And they've been on the NHS waiting list for like 4 years. And so it wasn't until I started my Instagram account, which was about a year and a half ago. I think I was like talking about ADHD and how it linked to me. A follower said, do you know about the NHS right to choose route? And I was just like, no, I haven't got a clue. And he's like, oh yeah, well you can speak to your GP and you can actually request this right to choose route where you can go to a different organisation that's still accredited to the NHS, but you won't have to be waiting. You can be waiting like maybe like 12 months. So I was just like, oh, right, well, I'll do that. So it was meant to be 8 years
Wow. Oh my God.
until my next stage. So this is bearing in mind, it was around about this time in 2020 when I actually put my referral in, all my evidence and stuff, supported by my GP, and I got a letter for the actual NHS one was 84 months. I was just like,
Oh my
that's
God.
8 years.
Yeah, in somebody's life.
So there's going to be so many people out there who are just kind of sat there waiting, not getting like the support they need. So if anyone's listening, and just provide the evidence for the right to choose route, because like I say, you can get assessed within a much shorter time period. So I went down the NHS right to choose route, and I've got my video appointment. So it's like the first stage of the diagnosis on
Oh,
Friday.
wow.
So I'm super excited for that.
That's very exciting. I like your, you do, I want to say feature, for want of a better word. Is it ADHD or is it me? Is that right? Your little votes, which I participate in quite a lot.
A lot of my following after the ADHD community are so useful, and that they are really trying to help each other out. I've got a really nice community on Instagram, and I was just trying to like learn more about myself, my brain, and just drawing on people who actually have ADHD and saying, could this be a trait of ADHD, or is this just kind of me? And everyone I've put so far has been, I've had a vote. They've all been in the 90%
Yep.
for it is ADHD. It is an ADHD trait. Even to the point where I'll notice things now that I'll be dopamine seeking for.
Mm.
Like even this, you were dead organized and sent out the questions on what we're going to cover, and I didn't look at it until like very last minute.
Oh, don't, if it makes you feel any better, if the roles were reversed, that would be me too.
So it's just little things like that, and feel like I do really well in my assistant head role. And in terms of like crisis, I can deal with like a lot of things, but then at the same time, one little thing's like not quite right, that'll throw me. And I was just like, how can you be that good and calm and like in a say like a situation of extreme violence, but something over there's like bothered you?
Yeah.
And it's just the auditory stuff. The auditory one's the main one. It's like my wife's giving me, like speaking to me like auditory. Like sometimes it just doesn't go in. But at the same time, if I'm in a classroom, I can hear conversations right at the back of the class that I probably shouldn't hear. Like picking people up on the language, like, oh, how did you hear that? I'm just like, just can't.
That's the most amazing thing, isn't it? It's such a
It is.
fascinating and yet very complex neurodiversity. And there's science behind all of the things
Mm,
that you're just saying and the things that I massively recognize myself. But I think this is what makes it so interesting and why I feel so passionate about educating people on ADHD. Like you said, you do even with the kids in your classroom, because if we can really understand how nuanced this is, and then we can help
yeah.
share that information with our children or other teachers, and we can really, really help our kids work with their brains. It's like they're unlocking the key to their potential and success in whatever environment they're with. And going, in fact, full circle right back to what you said at the beginning. You know, you were 17 when you came into this school, and from the very first day, even children that were actually pretty much your same age, you've had this ability to relate to them. So what do you think? I mean, is that to do with your ADHD?
I think it is personally. I think it is. It's got to be. It's got to be a central part of it. Like I'm like very calm in nature and being able to manage when all this crisis is going around. That's so typical of an ADHD brain. So it's going to be an interesting one for me in the next few weeks, months when I finally get a decision. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for you. Well, good luck with it all. You have to keep us posted. And as I said earlier, I'll share all your social media handles so that people can follow that process themselves. Yeah, and we can hopefully, no doubt, welcome you to our little tribe. But thank you again, Jamie, for your time. I am so inspired by you, and I mean that really sincerely.
Oh,
So
thank you.
thank you for talking to us today. And
Oh no, anytime. Anytime.
I look forward to maybe having another conversation with you sometime in the future on the many other areas we could delve into.
Lush. Thank you. I'm going to go for a movement break.
Yeah, me too. A well-deserved one, I think. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you. Bye.
If you'd like to follow Jamie and learn more about his work, then please do check out our show notes below for more information, along with links to his incredible TikTok and Instagram channels. Or if you'd like to find out about how I can help support you and your children with personalised ADHD coaching, then please do head to allaboardadhd.com. You can also find me on Instagram at allaboardadhd. Most importantly, if you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please can you follow and review All Aboard to help other parents find this podcast and welcome them aboard our journey too. Thank you for listening to All Aboard ADHD.